Again, we're beginning chapter 6 of John, and the discussion question is, how do you usually respond to possible situations? And the personal reflection is, can you recall a time when you faced a circumstance that seemed beyond your ability to handle? How did God demonstrate His presence and His power in that situation? And I want you to think about that. If you want to bring something up, bring something up. Otherwise, ponder it. And maybe we don't always see God reflected in our lives and given in certain situations. But basically, the point I'm trying to bring out now is, when you're in those situations, look to see God in your life, and maybe you might be surprised. So we're going to go on and with our reading. We're in chapter 6. I'm going to read the first 15 verses, then we'll get along to some discussion questions. And I'm glad to see Brian walk into the class, because I know he's got something to say. And we will let him say it. I'll try to say it. You know, Gary used to approach me all the time and say, Mike, you're always saying something. And so one week I went without saying anything, and who do you think I heard from? Mike, didn't you have anything to say today? So I learned it doesn't matter whether you talk or you don't talk, someone's going to give you a hard time. Gary. Beginning in verse 1. After these things, Jesus went over the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias. Then a great multitude followed him, because they saw his signs when he performed those who were diseased. And Jesus went up to the mountain, and there he sat with his disciples. Now the Passover feast of the Jews was near. Then Jesus lifted up his eyes, and seeing a great multitude coming toward him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread that these may eat?" But this he said to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread is not sufficient for them, that every one of them may have a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There is a lad here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish, but what are they among so many?" Then Jesus said, "Make the people sit down." And there was much grass in the place, so the men sat down in a number of about 5,000. And Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks for it, he distributed them to the disciples, and the disciples to those sitting down, and they likewise to the fish, as much as they wanted. So when they were filled, he said to his disciples, "Gather up the fragments that remain, so that nothing is lost." Therefore they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with the fragments of the 5 barley loaves were left over by those who had eaten. Then those men, when they had seen the sign that Jesus did, said, "This is truly the prophet who is to come into the world." Therefore, when Jesus perceived that they were about to come and take him by force to make a king, he departed again to the mountain by himself alone. How would you characterize Philip's and Andrew's response to the problem of feeding the enormous crowd? What do you think of their response?
They were practical.
They were practical. Philip says, and I'm assuming he had that amount of denarii on his person, because he said, well, we can go purchase this much bread, but this much bread ain't going to do us any good. Then Andrew, what was Andrew's response? We have a little bit. So what do you perceive the differences in these two answers?
Let's share what we got.
Let's share what we got. Okay, yeah, they all, well, we'll share, but it's not going to be enough to go around.
The other one saw what they didn't have, and one saw what they did have.
One saw what we didn't have. We don't have anything. The other said, well, we got this. We got a little. And what do you think the lesson to learn here is?
Remember the little you've got.
When we're faced with an impossible situation, what are we to do? Again, Troy says pray, pray.
Do your
But-
best.
Do you use what you have? If you're depending upon the Lord, use what you have, and the Lord may take care of the rest. Are you going to say something in your head?
No.
Okay, good. Jim?
There's a note here saying 200 denarii would be 6 or 7 months' pay,
Yeah.
which is quite a bit.
And so it was quite a bit.
With Jesus, a little is enough.
A little is enough. Good. Jim says a little is enough. Anything else on this? If Jesus knew what he was going to do, why do you think he asked these two disciples advice?
It says here,
To test them. To test them. Let me just go to what I want to say, then that Jim be added onto it. Jesus uses real life situations to teach his disciples. And basically that's what he's doing here. He's testing them, but he's teaching them. He's teaching them that a little is enough. Just do what you can is one of the things that he's teaching them. You know, does anybody have anything else on that?
We have to trust God to
Again,
provide.
what does that, we have to put our trust in Jesus. We have to put our trust in God that the situation will be handled or can be handled, or what needs to be done will be done. But, so Jesus, the 3 years that the disciples were with Jesus, did they know everything right away? No. They gradually learned to rely on Jesus. And this is another thing he's teaching them. You can rely on me. You can count on me in these situations. I will help you in your hour of need. What do we, go ahead, Jim.
they're next to a lake, he also could have supplied wine.
Jim said he could have given them wine because they were next to the lake of Tiberias. I guess if Jesus wanted to, he could have turned the lake of Tiberias into a lake of wine. But I don't think that would help his mission. But yeah, so nothing is beyond Jesus' grasp. So he took care of Gary.
2 Corinthians 3:5 reminds us we are not sufficient of ourselves, but instead our sufficiency is of God.
And that's probably another lesson that's being brought out here to his disciples. You're not sufficient of yourself. You need to rely upon God. How do you think the disciples feel after they gather up the leftover pieces?
Probably amazed.
In awe, amazed. Look at what Jesus can do. We are following this man. Look at what he can do. I want to say, and I might be right, I might be wrong. This is not a salvation issue, Marilyn, but I might be wrong. I might say that the disciples might have been a little disappointed in themselves.
We agree on that.
Well, why didn't you say something, Marilyn?
We just said it.
I don't nearly have the same heart attack when you agree with me, but when Gary agrees with me, my heart stops. But there, they might have been some embarrassment, disappointment. They might have, because they've been with Jesus for a while. They've seen the things that Jesus has done. They might have been embarrassed or disappointed because they gave up on Jesus just a little bit too quickly. Again, thinking the situation was impossible. But we can see the impossible is possible with God, with Jesus. Jim?
They each had a basket.
Jim's bringing up the part there, there were 12 baskets left over. And how many disciples were there? 12. They got fed too. So they might have just been filling their bellies and not thinking anything. I don't know that. I think they, Jesus did the situation so that they could learn.
They had more than they had.
There was more left over than what they started with. That would have to be pretty amazing in itself. Jim?
I just noticed, it says that there were 12 baskets with broken pieces from the 5 barley loaves.
Didn't say anything about fish.
Doesn't mention the fish?
I don't know if the other accounts mentioned the fish or not, Matthew and Mark, but yeah, but there was more left over. Spoilage. Now, maybe they didn't want fish left over because it's going to spoilage, or maybe because they were fishermen, maybe they were just tired of fish. Okay, I got a laugh out of Jim. No, maybe. The rest of you need to work on your humor. What insight does this passage give you into how Jesus may be at work in the difficult situations of your life?
One time, I was going somewhere, and I didn't have it was before they locked all the doors when you started the car. And I stopped at a stoplight, and someone got into my car. And it was, I couldn't even say anything. And he says, I just need to go down a couple miles. And so I drove a couple of miles and let him out. And it was okay, but it scared me because Ron, my goodness, I couldn't go anywhere without somebody to accompany me all the time. But, when the kids are in school and you're doing things, and it was shocking to me, and I'm very glad that now when you start the car, the doors all lock.
So, what God has done for Donna is automatic locking doors, which, who knows, maybe that's why he did it. But, but I'm sure that when Donna was in this situation, I want to say, and speaking for Donna, I think she felt the presence of God with her. Maybe she was praying while this was going on. And she saw that prayer answered when the guy got out of the car. But I've never been in a situation like that. Nobody ever wants to get in the car with me. Brian?
Yeah, as I'm reading this, I think about what he had to work with too, and we see this throughout the scriptures, and especially here recently with the birth of Jesus. A barley loaf is it's not a real significant piece of bread. It was not the highest, the mightiest, the largest. We see pictures of this story, and we see these big loaves of bread and these large fish sometimes, but that's not what this was.
No, this was little pieces of fish.
Barley loaf is not amazing.
A couple of sardines.
Exactly.
And a couple wafers of bread.
So it makes me think that, God can work in the little, what we see as the little, the insignificant things in our life, he can do wonders with.
He can do.
And so we have to remember that too. So what we deem as maybe a little insignificant, we have to remember that in everything, God can do amazing things, and that we have to be ready for him to do amazing things through our little insignificant things that we see. That's something insignificant to us.
Yeah, God doesn't need a whole lot to do a whole lot. No. And like I said, most of us, again, when we're in a situation like Donna was there, she might not have seen God in that situation, but I think she was thankful to God when she reached the destination of this van and he got out, and GM invented locked doors. So
Jim. Mark does give more detail apparently Jesus asked them to look and see how many loaves they have. And that's when he found the boy that had 5 loaves. And it also says that he divided the fish among them all. And they took up 12 baskets full of broken pieces and also of the fish. So apparently they did have fish left.
Yeah,
as well.
You know, so Jim says in the account, in Mark, it's mentioned that there was leftover fish. But, you know, there are people that want to jump on this and say, well, the Bible's contradicting itself. That's not the case here, folks. It's just that John is presenting the facts that he thinks is necessary to present.